Most advisors understand the importance of building relationships with their clients, children, and grandchildren. But understanding the opportunity and creating a repeatable process are two very different things. The challenge comes in the execution. How do you make the introduction without it feeling awkward? Turning it into a sales pitch or making sure that even actually gets scheduled. Because understand, this is more than just a missed relationship opportunity. It's a retention and business continuity risk. When a client passes away and the beneficiaries have little or no relationship with the advisor or the firm, they may have little or no reason to stay. This creates risk for the current advisor, the next generation advisor preparing to lead, and the long-term value of your firm. Today, I want to break down one practical way to address all three risks. The family phone call. Not a large family meeting, not an estate planning presentation, and not a pitch. Simply a short, intentional introduction designed to establish trust before the family needs you. Let's get started.
This is The Rare Advisor, a show for financial advisors who want to build and grow their practice through the use of a business model supercharged by recurring and repeatable events. The Rare Advisor is brought to you by the Advisor Protocol Consulting Team at USA Financial.
Welcome back to the Rare Advisor podcast, where we help independent financial advisors create reoccurring and repeatable events so they can deliver more consistent value, build stronger relationships, and sustain intentional growth. I'm your host, Grady, and today we're taking a deeper look at a strategy we first introduced during an earlier conversation about overlooked client retention opportunities, the family phone call. But today, we're going to move beyond the why, and we're going to start breaking down how to make multi-generational relationship building a repeatable part of your practice. Because the idea itself is pretty simple, but the process is where most firms fall short. The family phone call is not just about retaining assets after a wealth transfer. It's about strengthening relationships, reducing succession risk, and protecting the long-term value of your firm. Now, let's dig into what exactly is the family phone call. The family phone call is simply a brief, typically 15 to 20 minute video or phone call involving the advisor, the client, and the people who are most important to the client. Now, this may include adult children, grandchildren, a sibling, a trustee, a close friend, or someone else who may eventually play an important role in the client's life. The purpose of this call is not, and let me say this again, the purpose of this call is not to gather assets, provide financial advice to the children, or convince anyone to become a client. The purpose of the family phone call is to create familiarity before a moment of need. Look, too often, an advisor meets the next generation or potential next generation of client for the first time after a parent has passed away, or when they're experiencing a serious health event, or when the parent has lost the ability to manage their own affairs. The family at that point is already dealing with stress, uncertainty, or major decisions, and now the advisor is trying to introduce themselves in the midst of a crisis. The family phone call changes all of that. Instead of being in a situation where you're saying, your parents worked with us, after something has already happened, you become someone that the family has already met, they recognize, and they already know how to contact. The goal is not to complete the relationship on this initial call. The goal is simply to start the foundation of a new relationship. And look, over time, those relationships become part of what makes the firm more durable and more valuable. This is the part where the family phone call becomes more than a thoughtful client experience. While the client should always experience it as a service designed to support their family, the firm should also recognize the larger strategic purpose behind the family phone call. This is more than a value-added service. Now, look, don't get me wrong. The family phone call should absolutely be positioned as a value-added service for your clients. But advisors should also recognize that what it represents strategically to the firm. it's a retention strategy. It's a succession strategy, and it's even more so an enterprise value strategy. When the client relationship exists primarily between the client and one advisor, say the lead advisor, the firm may actually be managing a relationship that has an expiration date. This creates risk for the current owner and potentially an even greater risk for a potential next-gen advisor that expects to become the firm's succession strategy. Look, a next-gen advisor may believe they're preparing to inherit a healthy book of business, but what they may actually be inheriting is an aging client base whose loyalty is tied to primarily just the founder. Look, succession can't focus only on transferring ownership, leadership responsibility, and the decision-making authority. Succession, it must also introduce the transfer of relationships and trust. And the family phone call creates a practical and natural place for this transfer to start. So why would this process work differently than what maybe you've tried in the past? Why would a client actually say yes to hosting or being part of a family phone call? Because understand, over the years, and I've done this long enough, I've heard many of an advisor tell me, well, I've tried similar approaches with limited success. We've done our over the holidays. Hey, while you're in town, let's get together, and have a conversation with the family. Look, when I've dug deeper into all of these cases, what I have found and identified is that in most of them, what they were calling a process, and this is a key distinction, what they call a process was really little more than a heartfelt, half-hearted, advisor-centered attempt to get introduced to the client's children. Often with little or no clear structure, no consistent follow-up, and no real focus on creating value for the family. Look, the reason the family phone call works is because it starts with the client's interests first, not the advisor's. And I understand the idea is eventually to end up with a next generation client and a client relationship, but giving starts the receiving process. And so we start with the client's needs first, and laws of reciprocity starts working in our favor. So we're not saying, and so this is what we should not be doing. We're not going into this and going, hey, look, we want to meet your clients because we hope to retain their assets someday. What you're really saying, and you should be saying, is as a part of the work that we do with our client families, we want the people closest to you to know who we are, understand the role that we play in your life, and know how to reach us if there is ever a need. And for the client, this is about creating confidence and peace of mind for them. They don't want their family starting from zero during a difficult situation. And understand this distinction matters because for the firm to deliver on this promise, it needs a clear and consistent process. And so let's dig into the family phone call process. So we talked about, let's really get into the how do we execute this. I hope I painted a good enough picture of why and what it is. Let's talk about how. How do you actually execute it? So the family phone call process is essentially an 8-step process for the sake of what we're going to talk about today. Step 1 is to identify the when and the who of this process. Now, look, there are 2 implementation paths, one for new clients and one for existing clients. For new clients, I would encourage you to make the family phone call part of the standard onboarding process. Introduce it during the first strategy and tactical meeting following the new client onboarding process, as this is just going to be the very next step in the client experience. Don't make this an optional promotion or an idea to consider someday because it will never come to fruition. For existing clients, begin by taking inventory. Start with your most valued client relationships. Ask, which of these clients have adult children or grandchildren? Which family members have we already met? Where does the firm have a meaningful relationship? Where does the next generation or next gen advisor have a relationship? Where Is there no connection currently existing at all? Then create a simple tracking document. Track the client, the relevant family members, the current relationship owner, whether the family phone call has been introduced as a concept, whether it's been scheduled, whether it's been completed, and what follow-up has occurred afterwards. And look, you don't need any sophisticated technology to begin this process. You can use a simple spreadsheet or you can use a simple Word document. Just get it down on paper and start tracking your results. What we're seeking to do here is simply to turn the idea of we should meet our clients' children into a process that has names, ownership dates, and next steps. So step 2 is to introduce the concept of the call. Now, for existing clients, the family phone call doesn't need to appear from nowhere. It doesn't need to appear out of thin air. What you could do is you could start by beginning by planting a seed during an earlier strategy and tactical meeting. You could say something like, one of the areas we are continuing to develop is how we support the people who are most important to our clients. Later this year, we're going to introduce a simple way for your family to meet our team, understand the roles we play, and know how to reach us if there's ever anything we can do. At that stage, you're not asking the client to make a decision. You're simply creating context. Then, during a future meeting, you can formally introduce the service. At that point, you could say, it's been in our experience that the worst time in our client relationships where we get introduced to someone who's most important to you is during a moment of crisis or when something unfortunate has happened, maybe a passing of a loved one or serious illness. So, as we previously mentioned on a previous call, we have been creating a way to help your family become more familiar with our team. We call it the family phone call. It is a simple, short, brief conversation where you can introduce us to your children or important other family members. For the client, for new clients, the introduction can be more direct because, we're starting this at a new part in the relationship. You could start it similarly, though. You could say, in our experience, the worst time in a client relationship where we get introduced to those who are most important to you is when something significant has happened, a critical financial or life event, serious illness, a death of a spouse, something that forces us into the picture. And so as part of the work that we do with our clients and their families, we want the people who are closest to you to know who we are, the role we play in your financial life, and how to reach us if they ever need anything. We do this through a short family phone call where you can introduce us to your children or other important family members. Look, in either case, make it clear, and this is important, in either case, new client or existing clients, you need to make it clear that the purpose is not to discuss their accounts, their beneficiaries, or private financial matters. If they want to do those things, you can schedule a time to have these conversations with the clients and their children or beneficiaries. This first meeting needs to simply be about the introduction, the getting to know one another. It is simply an opportunity to briefly explain who you are, the role you play in the client's life, and how the family can reach you if they ever need a resource, and an opportunity to meet the people who matter the most to the client before a critical financial or life event forces the introduction. Step 3, schedule this immediately. This may be the most important implementation detail. Schedule the call while the client is sitting in front of you. Don't end the conversation with, talk to your kids, talk to your children, your grandchildren, and let us know what works. Once the client leaves, life's going to take over and the call may never happen. Instead, say this: let's reserve a time now so that this does not get lost. If your family needs to adjust it, we can always find another time. Before the meeting ends, you need to collect the names, phone numbers, and email addresses of everyone who will be involved in this family phone call. This is so that your team can send out the meeting invites. Because if this is going to be done via Zoom or via Teams or another electronic media, you need a way to send the invitation. It's also a good way to collect the contact information for these loved ones. Also, ask the client to let their family know that an invitation is coming. That small step reduces confusion. It keeps an unexpected email from an unfamiliar advisory firm from being ignored. Step 4, prepare for the call. Once the call is scheduled, assign clear responsibility. Who's going to send the invitation? Who's going to confirm attendance? Who will lead the call? What role will the lead advisor play? What role, if any, will the next gen advisor play? The client should receive a simple confirmation explaining that the meeting will last only 15 to 20 minutes and will not involve any discussion around private financial information. If a next gen advisor is part of the firm, or even part of I should probably say as part of the firm's succession strategy, include them in whatever manner is appropriate. You could say something like this. Lead advisor could include some talking points around, I always, or I should say, I also wanted you to meet Jack. He's an important part of our advisory team, and he will continue to play a larger role in helping your family in the years to come. It's a small statement, but it creates a meaningful trust transfer. The next gen advisor should also have a defined role in this process. They might lead the introductions. They could explain the firm's team-based approach. They could become the family's primary point of contact after the meeting. This is a great way for the next gen advisor to begin to develop relationships that they can eventually own. And those relationships are what allow a successor to truly inherit a business, not just a book of business. So trust is not transferred through an announcement. It's transferred through repeated, meaningful interactions over time. Step 5, conduct the call. The biggest mistake most advisors try to make is trying to do too much on this call. Once the call begins, resist the temptation to turn this into a full financial planning meeting. Remember, 15, 20 minutes is enough. Use a simple, repeatable agenda. First, welcome everyone and thank them for joining. Second, let the client make the introduction and briefly explain why they wanted everyone to connect. Third, explain who the firm is and the role you play in the client's life. Fourth, introduce the next gen advisor or other important team members on the call. And then finally, let the family know that your team is available if they need guidance or if they simply need a sounding board. You could say something like this. Your parents asked us to connect because they wanted you to know who we are and how to reach us. Our role is to help them organize their financial life, think through important decisions, and coordinate the different pieces of their financial plan. We hope you never have a reason to call us during a difficult moment. But if something comes up, we want you to know we're here. Then stop. That's the message. You don't have to overwhelm them with your entire service model. You don't need to request account statements. You definitely shouldn't ask them about their finances or assets, and don't push towards a discovery meeting. This is a trust-building conversation, not a conversion conversation. Step 6, the follow-up. Look, the call may be short, but the follow-up is where the relationship begins to develop. Within 24 hours, send each family member a thank you email. Reintroduce the team. Provide your contact information and remind them that you are available as a resource. You can even offer a private 20 to 30 minute sounding board, or some people call it an ask us anything conversation. And understand, the wording matters here. So you might say something like, we recognize that you may not have felt comfortable asking questions about your own circumstances during a family conversation. As an extension of our relationship with your parents, we would be happy to give you some time to ask questions or talk through anything that may be on your mind. This is a gift of access, not a sales follow-up. Providing a gift of your time as an extension of the relationship is a big step forward. Then, within the following week, I would encourage you to send a handwritten note. It's a small thing, but it's a big step. Send a handwritten thank you note, thanking them again for the chance to meet. Then connect with them on LinkedIn when appropriate. Update your family tree resources and documents the relationship in your CRM. Additionally, if you have a helpful legacy care or caregiving or financial organization resource like a booklet or a handout or a worksheet, any additional content that'd be relevant to a next gen relationship, send that as an additional follow-up. Remember, top of mind awareness. We're creating top of mind awareness. And if you have a next gen that's on the staff, I would make the next gen own as much of this process as possible. They can send the email, they can write the note, they can conduct or participate in the sounding board meetings, and they can become the family's ongoing point of contact. Step 7, nurture the relationship. Look, the process does not end after the thank you note. With permission, include family members in any relevant educational communications, webinars, public events, financial literary resources. Pay attention to the natural opportunities to connect. Do they get a new job? Are they getting married? Do they have a new child? Do they buy a new home? Is there a caregiving opportunity? Or a question involving their parents? Look, the goal is not to market aggressively. The goal is to remain familiar, relevant, and useful. We talk about moments of truth and acknowledging these seminal moments in people's lives. Well, if you're staying in contact with the kids and the grandkids and these others that are important, you'll be aware of these moments. And over time, those consistent touches will help transfer a client relationship into a family relationship. And step 8, track your progress. We talked about creating that simple tracking document earlier. You want to measure your progress through the lens of success and execution. Success is the first element. And look, success is not whether the children immediately become clients. In a perfect world, that would happen. They would just, all the fish would jump in the boat, right? But that is the wrong scoreboard to be using for this process. Early success looks like this. Is the family, do the family know do they know your name? Do they understand your role? Do they know how to reach you? Do they see your firm as a resource? And have they begun developing familiarity with the next gen advisor? And then ultimately, does your client feel more confident because an important relationship now exists between you and their loved ones? And then to track execution, you should look at things, as we said earlier on the tracking document, track how many family phone calls have been introduced, how many have been scheduled, how many have been completed, track the follow-up and what was completed and was it completed on time, track how many family members accept sounding board conversations, attend events, or engage in other in educational content. And for firms preparing for succession, this is important. Track one more critical question. How many of your best clients' families have meaningful relationships with the person expected to lead your firm next? Because a succession plan built around someone who does not yet have relationships with the clients or their beneficiaries is not a complete succession plan. Understand, most advisors don't lose multi-generational relationships because another advisor delivered a better investment presentation. They lose them because the next generation client never developed a relationship with the firm in the first place. And the next generation advisor doesn't automatically inherit relationships because they inherit a title or ownership position or a book of business. Trust has to be built before it's needed. The family phone call provides a simple process to address both needs and a path to change that. Identify the right families. Introduce the service around their needs. Schedule the conversation immediately. Prepare your team. Keep the call short and pressure-free. Follow up in a way that demonstrates genuine availability and care. And continue creating value over time. It may only be a brief conversation on the family phone call, but those first few minutes can strengthen the current client relationship, reduce a major retention risk, support the firm's succession strategy, and ultimately open the door to serving a family for generations. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Rare Advisor Podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, make sure to like and subscribe and share this episode with another advisor who may be working to strengthen multi-generational relationships or prepare the next generation of leadership within their firm. And remember, as I always say, when your why is clear, the how becomes easy. So never lose sight of your why.
This information is for licensed financial professionals only and is not intended for use in soliciting sales from the public. The views expressed represent the opinions of the presenter or their featured guest, not necessarily those of USA Financial or its affiliated subsidiaries. Industry references are generic and not intended to represent actions or beliefs of any individual or entity. Content is only presented to illustrate general principles, beliefs, or ideas and should not be construed as legal or regulatory advice. Trademark and copyright protected. USA Financial and Affiliates.